Hello everyone and welcome to today's SPM Summit online event series. This experience exchange for software product managers is brought to you by the ISPMA, the International Software Product Management Association, together with our partner and company member Logi Analytics. Our speaker today is Hans-Bernd Kittlaus, and he'll share his insights on customer-specific tailorability, specifically for B2B software products. And based on his broad experience, he'll be able to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm Barbara Häusl, and I'm the host of today's webinar. And this webinar is recorded, and you can ask questions via the chat, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end of the webinar. I'd like to give a little bit of a background, who is bringing this webinar to you. So this webinar is brought to you by the ISPMA together with our industry partner and ISPMA member, Logi Analytics. And the ISPMA is really about fostering or promoting the discipline of software product management. It's industry and academia have joined forces in the ISPMA. That's one thing that's special about us, that we have both leading software companies as members, as well as leading researchers in the area of software product management. So one of the contributions that the ISPMA is doing to, as I said, foster the discipline of software product management is we have created a body of knowledge. Which includes the software product management framework that you see here, which defines the activities that software product managers typically have to do themselves, or to orchestrate or work together with other functions to achieve. And this is one part of our body of knowledge. And next slide. The other part is that we have defined a full curriculum of certification trainings for software product managers, which consists of a foundation level training that takes 3 days, and there is a certification available for that. And then we have 4 excellence level syllabi defined for excellence level trainings in the areas of strategic management, product strategy, product planning, and orchestration. And these are again 2 to 3 day trainings, fairly in-depth. And the foundation level is more building the knowledge basis, and the excellence levels are more about the ability to apply. So they are more hands-on and workshop oriented. Yeah, and these trainings then are delivered by trainers that are not by the ISPMA itself, but by trainers. And also then the third party that's involved is the certification providers, who are also independent certification testing companies, for example, the ISPMA, which also does it for some other software related certifications. Yeah, and with next slide, please. And so if you want to learn more about that, for example, the syllabi for these trainings that I just showed are freely available. You are welcome to join us at ispma.org. As I said, we are a community of practitioners, researchers, and experts, and there is a free entry-level membership. Yeah, and one of the other things that we are doing is we are now in the 3rd year of holding our annual Software Product Management Summit, the conference of the ISPMA, together with our industry partners. And the summit this year will take place on September 15 and 16, 2020 in Frankfurt in Germany. And it's a physical conference with an additional online track. So part of the conference is available through an online track. And if you'd like more information, or we'd love to meet you there, of course, everything is available on spmsummit.org. And with that, I would like to hand it over to our speaker, Hans-Bernd.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Welcome to everybody. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. Today I'm going to talk about customer-specific tailorability of software products and software intensive products. And I chose the subtitle here, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I can tell you that over the years, I have seen a number of fairly ugly situations in the space. So that's also what I'm going to talk about. Few words about myself. I run my own training and consulting company called Continuum. I'm also the chairman of ISPMA. My background is in software, so I've spent my whole career on software, from studying computer science through working for IBM for a number of years, working for the German savings banks organization for a long time, and then running my own business. Software product management has been my main focus area for a long time. I've done lots of trainings and consulting engagements for large and smaller companies all over the world, in particular in Europe and Asia. I've published a couple of books, some of them on software product management. The latest one is the one that you see here on the left side. So that is compliant with ISPMA's body of knowledge, the syllabi that Barbara talked about. And so this can be used as a textbook for ISPMA-based trainings. On the subject of customer-specific tailorability, I want to start with defining a few relevant terms and give you a classification of tailorability. And then we'll look at the business perspective of the subject, and later on at the technical perspective, before I wrap it up. And of course, you can ask questions. Feel free to use the chat function here during my presentation. You can already enter your questions there, and then Barbara will read those questions, and hopefully I can answer them. So let's start with the introduction part. Well, when we look at the software industry, there are significant differences between B2C products and B2B products. For B2C products, well, consumers usually do not expect that the standard software product takes their individual requirements into account. So they look at the product, they take it as it comes, and either they like it and they use it, or they don't like it and they don't use it. What they may expect is some level of personalization, so that they are able to personalize the software, put their photo in there, their name, those kind of things. But that's about it. In B2B, it's a different situation. So from a B2B customer perspective, ideally, the customer wants a standard product that fulfills all of his specific requirements. Given that customers have different requirements, of course, that is an ideal that is not really realistic. So from a vendor perspective, since we want to provide a standard product, we need to think about options, how a customer can adapt the standard product to his specific requirements. And that's what tailorability is about. What can we do in our standard product so that the customer has these options to adapt the product to his specific requirements. We see three categories of options. The first one is called configuration. What happened here? The first one is called configuration. So that is really about parameters. You define configuration options and implement them in your standard product, and then the customer can set or change these parameters based on his requirements. The second option is called composition. So that's about, let's say, a component model of your product offering, where the customer can decide which components he or she wants to use and which ones he or she does not want to use. And then by arranging these components and combining them to one system, that's the composition that meets the customer's requirements. Think about SAP. They have lots of components, and as a customer, you have to decide which ones you want to use. Do you want to use their business intelligence components? Do you want to use their CRM components? So by choosing the components, you make a decision which SAP functionality you want to have in your system, and that's part of the composition approach. The third option and class here is customization. That's about code. So with customization, you add or change code in relation to the product. That is something that can be fairly expensive. So very often, when you think about SAP, such customization projects can go on for 1.5 years and cost more than the license for SAP. So that is a big area, and here we can differentiate two, let's say, flavors. One is non-invasive customization. This means that you as the vendor provide standard interfaces, and any tailorability, any tailoring is done through these interfaces. Any customization is done through these interfaces. So these interfaces are usually APIs, and you program additional code against the API of the standard product. That can work quite nicely, and that ensures that your upgrade mechanisms for the standard product continue to work. So you upgrade the code of your standard product. When the interfaces continue to be stable, then the customer may not even have to adapt his customized code at all, and it continues to run based on these interfaces. The second flavor is invasive customization, and that is more critical because it means that you make changes inside your standard code that are customer specific. That can happen when you as the vendor are willing to do that, when you implement customer requirements inside your standard code, even though you may know that this requirement is not valuable to anybody else, you still implement it in your standard code. That would already be invasive customization. Or the other option here is what some companies do. they make the source code of the product available to customers so that the customers can change the product code themselves. And that is also invasive customization. In the second case, it means that your normal upgrade procedures do not work anymore, because with the upgrade, you override the customer-specific customization, and it needs to be redone on the new release of your standard product. So that is an issue that a lot of customers have with invasive customization. Of course, an extreme case of this is what I've also seen more often than I would have expected, that vendors go to customer-specific code bases. So they have different code bases for different customers because they have adapted the standard code to specific customer requirements. You could say that that is no longer a standard product concept anymore. That is really where you go to customer-specific implementations. So you really kind of destroy the standard product approach when you do that. But I must say that I've seen that quite often, and even with companies where you would not have expected that. And in some of these cases, the customers didn't even know that. The customers believed that they were on a standard product when they actually were on a separate code base. So very tricky situations. So this last case, the invasive customization is the critical case. That's where it gets ugly. This is an attempt to show the connection between a number of parameters. On the x-axis here, you see the variability of requirements from different customers. So how variable are the requirements? How different are the requirements that you get from different customers? And on the y-axis, we look at the effort that you put into implementing tailorability, plus the effort that goes into the tailoring in the individual customer situation. And then I introduce another axis here, which is the size of the reachable market, which is here in blue. Now, let's look at the first case, which is a standard product without any tailorability. So basically what you say to the market is, this is our product, take it or leave it. Well, if variability of requirements is 0, all customers have exactly the same requirements, then you reach the full size of your reachable market with that product. But as soon as the variability goes up, the size of your reachable market goes down, because for a lot of customers, you just do not fulfill their requirements anymore, and there is no way how you can adapt the products to those requirements. So at the bottom here, you may end up with a product that only fulfills the requirements of one customer. And that's the extreme case. So this does not look promising for a B2B standard software product. Now, the other case, when we implement and provide tailorability, looks like this. So we invest in tailorability, and of course we also have to put effort into the tailoring for the individual customer. The more variability goes up, the more we have to invest. That's the way how to make sure that the size of our reachable market stays on this high level here. Of course, when the variability goes beyond a certain point, this approach may not make sense anymore. So if all target customers have totally different requirements, it may not make sense to develop a standard product for that market because there is no standard. Everybody has totally different requirements. So in that case, you may decide that you only do customer specific projects. Not all potential customers may be willing to pay for these projects, but those who are willing to pay, that's your reachable market with that approach. But this is a different business. This is no longer a standard product business. This is a professional service business. Now, this is a fairly high-level consideration. When you look into the details of the requirements, very often you find out that the variability is focused on certain areas of the product, and there are other areas where the variability is much lower. So one area where you very often have high variability is in the area of interfaces to surrounding systems in an application landscape. If that's what you find out, you may be able to encapsulate those areas with high variability and provide tailoring options for those areas, whereas the other functionality of your product is much more stable, and maybe you do not have to do a lot in terms of tailorability for those other areas. But that's a decision that you as a product manager have to make based on your analysis. So that there are a number of decisions with regard to tailorability, and we will come back to that a little later. Well, I talked about the fact that here on the right side, we talk about a professional service business. Now, this term service is a difficult term in the English language because it has a number of different meanings. When you look into the dictionary, what you see here is number one, useful labor that does not produce a tangible commodity. We know that as professional services in the software world. Then you find number two, a provision for maintenance and repair. In the software world, we know that as software maintenance service. And number three, the technical provision of a function through a software component over a network and executed on a remote server. And in the software world, we know that as web services or software as a service. Unfortunately, the same word service is used for these things, even though they are fairly different. So the first two are usually human services, people who do this work, whereas the third one is a technical service, very different from the first two, but the same word, which very often creates a lot of misunderstandings when people talk about services. I look at this as a kind of continuum. So here on the left side, we have customer-specific services, like you provide custom software development to an individual customer. And once you have developed that software, you provide maintenance for that software. But again, it's for one customer. So that is typical in the professional service world. There are ways how to improve your productivity in that business. So, for example, you may find out that you can reuse some software components in different customer projects. That increases your productivity. This does not yet mean that the software components have the characteristics of a full-blown product. It's just pieces of software that are reused. On the right side, we have the product, the pure product, that is the licensed software as it is. But in B2B, very often, customers do not just want the software itself, but they want the software in combination with product-related services, like maintenance, like product training. So these are services that are tightly linked to the product, and they are usually provided in a way that is not really customer specific. When a customer reports a bug in your software, you provide maintenance, you fix the bug, but you do not fix it for just one customer. You fix it and the fix will become available to your other customers as well. Whereas on the left side, these are services that are very customer specific. So you do something for one individual customer. Now, when we look at the term software as a service, even though the word service is in there, it's really here on the right side. It's a standard product approach where you have software plus related services, and in the case of software as a service, hosting is one of these related services. That has already been the source of misunderstandings, surprising misunderstandings. Think of IBM. When they wanted to go into the cloud business, their professional service organization said, well, we have a lot of experience with computing center outsourcing. Software as a service is basically the outsourcing of running the software. So give that topic to us. We will handle it for IBM. That was a big failure for IBM because software as a service is not a professional service for the individual customer. If you want to be successful with software as a service, you have to manage it as a standard product offering. So it belongs to the product organization and not to the professional service organization. That cost IBM a lot of money. That was a very expensive mistake. Basically, you could say they tried to fix that mistake by buying Red Hat, and they invested $32 billion when they bought Red Hat. So on the right side, we have what we call complete or whole product offerings. And on the left side, we have professional service offerings. Why is this differentiation relevant? Well, the business models on the two sides are fairly different. So you cannot use a professional service model, business model to run a product business, and you cannot use a product business model to run a professional service business. You better differentiate here. And we will talk about the details of those differences in a minute. When we look at tailorability, that is really something that you do on the right side. So in your standard product, you have to implement tailorability. You have to enable people in your standard product that they can tailor the system. Excuse me. Whereas the tailoring, where you adapt the standard software to the requirements of an individual customer, that is a professional service activity. So that would be on the left side here. Now let's take a look at the business perspective. What are the differences between a professional service business model and a product business model? Well, in a professional service model, your focus is really on the individual customer project. So you run a number of customer projects in parallel. In a product business, your focus is on the product, and you want the product to address the requirements of a market. And the market requirements are not identical to the requirements of an individual customer. So it's a different focus in a product business. The financial model is also different. So in a product business, you usually have to make a significant upfront investment before you can really generate revenues. So that makes this business model more risky. Whereas in a service business, your requirement for upfront investment is more limited. Yes, you have to hire people as consultants, but the upfront investment is not so high, but that is aligned with the profit expectations. A service business can be a wonderful business, but your profit will be limited. People are not willing to pay any price for a particular day of a consultant. Whereas in a product business, the potential for profit is much higher. So when you look at the list of the richest people in the world, there are a lot of software guys on that list. Think of Bill Gates and Larry Ellison and the Google guys. They have managed to come up with a standard product and sell it in large quantities. And then this business model is like printing money. Price calculation is also different. So in the service business, you typically calculate the price based on cost. You know the salary of your consultant, you add a general cost margin, you add a profit margin, and that's the price at which you want to offer that service. That approach does not work in a product business. There is no cost base per customer that we could use as a basis. So in the product business, we really try to go with value-based pricing, where we focus on customer value and try to take that into account when we define our pricing. KPIs are very different in the two business models. You can manage a service business based on utilization rate, which is the percentage how much time a consultant spends in customer projects on average compared to his complete working hours. The higher the utilization rate, the better. That is a KPI that does not work in a product business. If you apply that to a product business, you kill the product business. You do not want your product developers to work on customer-specific projects. You want them to work on the standard product. So in a product business, we focus much more on KPIs like market share or profit. And last but not least, the market valuation is different. So market valuation in relation to the annual revenue is much higher for a product business than it is for a service business, so that is aligned to the profit expectations. So what this shows is that the business models are very different, and you need to take that into account in your business approach. And that's what all the big players do. When you think of IBM, HP, big companies who have both product business and professional service business, they separate the businesses organizationally on a very high level of the company. And that's why the different business models do not go well together. Plus, there are also different cultures between a professional service and a product organization. So that's why they tend to separate that. That may not be an option in a smaller B2B company. So in smaller companies, in particular in startups, you do not separate. So there you typically find a mixed approach, but that does have its challenges because of the differences in the business models. Now, when we look at customization from a customer's perspective versus a vendor's perspective, well, from a vendor perspective, what would be a good approach is that you focus on a standard product and you enable non-invasive customization, which you can provide to customers as a professional service that the customer has to pay for separately on top of the price of the standard product. When you manage to come out with new releases of the standard product that are upwards compatible, that means the interfaces are unchanged, then an upgrade for the customer comes with no effort at all. So the customer does not even have to change the customized code because the interfaces are unchanged. So from a vendor perspective, that's wonderful. But usually customers are not fully satisfied with this, because when you remember my first slides, the customer expectation was that the standard product already fulfills all of his requirements. So the fact that they have to pay for customization is already not in line with the original expectation. Of course, customers get used to this, so you can go to this model, but well, there may be some resistance, in particular initially when you are in this startup phase with a new product. So in this early phase, what very often happens is that the customer expects you to implement all of his requirements in the standard product. And that's where you can easily get into trouble. So that's where some vendors end up with different code bases for different customers, because the differences in requirements are so high. The customer may even be willing to pay for some of the development effort, which makes this approach even more attractive for the vendor. So this has the advantage that customer expectations are fulfilled. So all the customer requirements are implemented in the standard product. From a vendor perspective, it also looks tempting, because the customer is willing to pay for part of the development effort. I'm more successful because I can fulfill all of the customer requirements. And it is a kind of learning phase to understand the variability of requirements in order to come up with a better tailorability approach later on. But when you do this, you end up with a code base, well, either with different code bases for different customers, or with one code base, but in that code base you have a lot of if customer A, then if customer B, then. And you can imagine what that means over time for the quality of the code and the maintainability of the code. So this is an approach that looks attractive initially, but over time it can turn into a nightmare, and it can severely lower your scalability options. So this approach may work with 10 customers, but usually not with 1,000 customers. It is also difficult in a SaaS environment. So if you have multiple code bases, you cannot run SaaS in a multi-tenancy mode. That means that you can only offer managed service where you run one instance of your software for each customer. You cannot share the instance between multiple customers. So again, this does not provide scalability. So a lot of bad long-term consequences of this approach, which means that at some point in time you better find ways how to come to a standard product and provide tailorability options so that specific customer requirements can be implemented through the tailorability options. The longer you wait before you go there, the more difficult it becomes. So at some point in time, most software vendors try to go there, but the migration is difficult for existing customers. The existing customer is used to a situation where the product fulfilled all of his requirements. Now, when you go to a standard product, some of the individual customers' requirements will not be fulfilled by that standard product. So this migration requires a lot of hand-holding with existing customers to get there. So that's why my recommendation is that you go to such a standard product approach as early as possible in your development phases of the product. That was the business perspective. Now, a brief look at the technical perspective. When you ship the standard product, it typically looks something like this from an architectural point of view. You have the code base of the standard product here. It says binary code, so typically you do not ship source code, you ship binary code, and that code has interfaces. So you may offer a number of configuration options down here, and you may offer APIs here so that customers can add additional code, or you may even provide changeable code, and the customer can use that code and change it based on his requirements. The changeable code should also be attached to the standard code through an API. Now, when you go to the installation of the product in a particular customer situation, this part, the standard code plus the APIs, should stay stable, untouched. The customer will do configuration here with the options that you provide. The customer may add code through the provided API, and the customer may change the code that you have provided as changeable code. But the core here continues to be untouched. So if you manage to do it this way, then all your upgrade procedures will work nicely, because when you go to a new release for a standard code, it works without problems if it's upwards compatible. Now, from a product manager's perspective, uh, in this process, you need to make decisions. You need to make decisions here. Which configuration options do we want to offer? What do we want them to look like? And also regarding the APIs. How do the APIs have to look like in order to address the areas where tailorability is needed? So that is not so easy, and that requires decisions, and it requires analysis regarding these tailorability requirements from different customers. All right. For maybe I should add, I also offer specific training on tailorability together with a colleague of mine who wrote his PhD on the technical aspects of tailorability. So we cover both the business side and the technical side in a 2-day training. Let me wrap it up. So we talked about the 3 categories of tailorability, which are configuration, composition, and customization. Initially, when you start a new product development, either as a startup company or even in established companies, when you start a new product, this kind of invasive customization looks tempting initially for both the vendor and the customer, but it has severe negative long-term consequences. And you better have in mind, in the back of your mind, from the very beginning, that you want to go to a standard product approach. And the earlier you can focus on standardization and scalability, the easier it is. So as a product company, that needs to be something that you think about early, even if with your initial customers, you have to implement a number of things that customers tell you if you do not have sufficient domain knowledge inside your company in the beginning. All right, so with that, I would like to go back to Barbara, and maybe you have some questions.
Yeah, we actually do have questions, and if you want, the first question is from Leo. Leo, if you want, you can also ask it in person.
Yeah, I wanted to know regarding your perspective on B2B, whether we think, whether you agree that there is a wide range of B2B types of companies, and there's the big difference between small B2B companies and large B2B companies. So now I'm talking about as a provider, as a vendor, looking at a company which is very huge on the one side, or a company that is very small. I think the B2B market is very different on those two ends, and everything in the middle of the spectrum.
Well, I mean, of course, any company or any product unit, even in larger companies, has to decide which business model they want to use. So if the decision is that you want to use a standard product business model, that is a different situation than when you decide, no, we rather want to go with a professional service business model with some reusable components. That's a decision that any company has to make, independent of the size. Uh, of course, I mean, when you are in a startup situation, few people, some of the aspects will not initially be relevant to you. So in a startup situation, you are happy that you have the first customer and you will try to make that customer happy. But that is from this differentiation that I showed, that is more like a professional service approach than it is a product approach. If you want to go to a product business model later on, you better have that in your mind from the beginning. So when you look at the requirements that if your first customer gives you, you may already think through what would be a better way to implement that so that we have some more flexibility, tailorability later on when we get additional customers. You may not yet have all the knowledge that is needed to make all these tailorability decisions in a good way. So that is an iterative learning process, but you still need to have that in your mind from the very beginning, because it's different than saying we only want to make this customer happy and we don't care about anything else. So uh, that is not dependent on the size of the organization. It is more dependent on the direction that you want to take with your software product or your software approach. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome, Leon.
Okay, we have a second comment, also a question and a comment, I would say. It's from Uwe. I don't know, Uwe, would you like to, yeah, please go ahead.
I can do. Thank you. Yeah, maybe you answer this question in the presentation after I raised it. It is more your experience at the customer side. Sometimes I have the feeling that in the 90s or at the beginnings of 21st century, we had a lot of custom developments at the customer side. So the customer, I have the feeling the customer is trained to have a custom experience, and like you said, every requirement is developed. So from also when we as a developer or company see there are the use cases are really the same, but they want to have it in a different way. Yeah, so from my side, it's also a culture thing or issue at the customer side. Do you also see this from your experience?
Well, I mean, there has been a trend, in particular in larger customer organizations, to using standard software. So customer organizations see the advantages of using standard software. In particular, they hope that they get to the functionality at a lower price and maybe also at higher quality levels. So there has been this trend, but that is more from a, let's say, from a top-down perspective. I've been involved in several projects actually, where the customer organization officially said we only want to use standard products. So they bought pretty expensive licenses of a CRM system, but then the different business departments came with their specific requirements. And the IT organization was very willing to take all these requirements and implement them. And in the end, they paid the expensive license of the standard CRM product, even though they used a little more than just the data structures, and everything else was custom development. You know, so I think there are two views on this and different objectives. I mean, the business people in the operational departments in a customer organization want the very specific support for their business processes, and they are usually not too inclined to accept that they have to migrate to different business processes simply because they are already implemented in that standard product. Whereas from a top-down perspective, the executive management, they will always say, we want our organization to only use standard software. We don't want any custom development anymore. So that is the landscape that I've been seeing for a long time. And maybe there is a slight trend to the standard side, but it is not that large customer organizations are fully convinced across the board that the standard approach is the only thing they want. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have another question from Kartik. Kartik, would you be willing to ask it? No.
Sure. Yeah. So the question that I have is, I own a product which is a B2B SaaS product, and I mean it's an on-prem, and we want to go SaaS. And this product is in multiple geographies. We have customers from North America, Latin America, Asia Pac, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. So how do we handle customizations, and how do we manage customer-specific requirements in a SaaS setup wherein we have more or less the standard code base and standard software being offered as part of the SaaS?
When you say SaaS, do you mean a multi-tenancy approach?
Yes, yeah, multi-tenancy.
Yes. Well, in that scenario, it's even more important to think through the tailorability requirements and implement interfaces that allow you to adapt the system to customer-specific requirements while you maintain that multi-tenancy SaaS approach. That is a technical challenge, architectural challenge, but of course it's also a product management challenge to really make decisions what you want to provide as interfaces. The work that is needed for that kind of tailoring or customization is usually done through professional service organizations. And then the question is your own professional service organization able to support your customers in all these geographies? If that's not the case, you may have to work with external partners, at least in some geographies, where these external partners can help customers with the professional service projects in which customization is done. And of course, you need to work with those partners so that they implement their customization in a way that is in line with your technical approach, so that when everything comes together in the runtime environment, that you do not get into trouble with your operations procedures and your performance and those kind of things.
Okay, thanks, Hans.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we need to wrap it up here because we are running out of time. Could you briefly share our 2 closing slides? So first of all, I would like to thank you, Hans-Bernd, for this very analytical and really helpful analysis and presentation. And
My pleasure. Thank you for hosting this.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if any of our participants has additional questions or comments, here's your contact information where you can be reached. And I would like also to take this opportunity to say thank you again to our partner and company member, Logi Analytics, who is supporting this event series and also our upcoming conference. And then in terms of what's the next thing you can expect from us, we are going on a summer break now, but the next event will happen on September 3, same time, and I will happen to be the speaker. I'll speak about tools that you can use to build a deeper customer empathy, deeper customer understanding, and how that is valuable, especially in times of rapid change and in a volatile market environment, because it allows you to change your approach fairly quickly. And with that, the registration will be made available on our spmsummit.org website. It's not yet there, but I guess it will be there within a few days. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much for your participation. Thanks again to Hans-Bernd, and we hope to meet some of you perhaps in the event in September, either physically in Frankfurt or through the online track.
Thank you very much, Barbara.